Hello, I'm Daniela. In today's video, we're going to create a whimsical Christmas tree. We're going to slow stitch this tree onto fabric, and it's based on the crazy quilting technique of a bygone era. So we'll use scraps of fabric. In this case, I chose Christmas fabric. I also chose one color. This is completely optional. You can combine patterns or fabrics or colors as you wish. I stuck with red today for the demo in class, and I made a Christmas tree. I incorporated some trim and some buttons, and then some additional stitches, just to make the piece really intriguing, original, and very interesting. So let's get started. So since this patchwork tree is based on like a crazy quilting technique, this is really fun because I went through my stash and chose a bunch of fabric. Now I went with the red theme, as you can see here, which was kind of strategic because a lot of the Christmas printed fabric has red in it. So I just chose the fabric where red was pretty dominant. I have some print, text here, little peppermint, some plaid, this type of thing. And I also chose a little neutral swatch for the tree stump. I have a bunch of little ribbons and trim, little fabric embellishments. This is from Stitch This Season, and some beads, and I might use these in my work. It's always nice to have those on hand, really at the ready. I might have other things in my stash that I want to use, but having them right in front of me where I can see them is really helpful. And I like to have that trim. I think it really sharpens up the piece. Can also add some buttons. And then I just chose two pieces of embroidery floss, two different colors, a deep burgundy and just a red. For my background, I have this piece of muslin. It's about 4 by 6, maybe a little leeway either way, but that's going to be the background. As you can see, it's just a little fabric swatch. It's not cut square. If you like it cut square, do that. I just wanted a piece that I could attach my tree to, and then I can use that tree in works. I can either cut around it, stitch around it, or anything from there. Now what I want to do is choose a piece of fabric to start my tree. I'm going to go with this piece, partly because it's my largest piece of fabric, but also the print is very forgiving. It's very pepperminty, and even if you don't get the whole peppermint, you get to see the red and white, so it's very indicative of the tree. Now, my fabric also is about the same size as my background piece, which is very strategic because then I can just cut the tree shape accordingly. I know that I'm not going to make it too large. Now, the tree does not have to be a perfect triangle. It doesn't even have to be a triangle, but I'm going to make it a triangle. It's just easy that way. So I'm going to kind of just lightly sketch it to get the height that I want, and then just play around with the angle. Now, I do that because if I cut it, you cut the fabric and then it's done. You'd have to choose another piece of fabric if it's not the right size. So from here, I'm just going to trim, and I'm going to give myself a lot of leeway. I'm going to make my tree a little bigger than I intended. And that way I can play around with it if it's not the right size. So this tree is just a little bigger than I want, but that's okay because it's just a snip away from being the right size. So again, I'll just fold my tree, shave it down just a little bit, a little closer to that original sketch that I made, and just a little shorter. So that's the size that I want. It gives me room for a stem, and if I want to put something on top, either a star or a button or some kind of embellishment, I have it ready. I'm going to set aside my background piece for now, and now I really have fun creating that tree. This is just the design process. So my original intention was to cut this down to make the tree stump, and that will work, but I think I'm actually going to use this color and this pattern fabric. I like the plaid anyway, and it is much darker than the rest of my fabric. So I'll just trim it down to about the size that I want. Again, a little bit bigger. And I'm starting to get my tree shape. Now I could leave it just like this right on my fabric and make it very whimsical because it's so unusual, but this is where I want to make it kind of that crazy quilt inspired. With the remaining fabrics that I have left, and I could always go back in and use this if I wanted, I'm going to cut pieces and just attach them on top of this peppermint tree. Now I want some of the peppermint to show, and I want it to be very simple and rustic. I have some other fabric to play with. I think I'll start right here though with my print because I do like this print. I like text in general, and I like the way it really makes things a little more intriguing and interesting. So I'm going to cut out this joy word. Just give it a little extra here and there. And so I'm going to use that. Now I want the background of my peppermint to show, and I'm going to layer over this as well. I'm going to eventually trim off any fabric that exists beyond this peppermint. And I want to also just trim a little bit over here, really making joy the only thing really showing there. And the same thing on the bottom. So this is the design process, and this takes a little bit of time. When you create yours, just figure out exactly how you want yours to look. So now I want to continue playing around, covering up parts of this tree. So I like this look, this pattern. I think I want it to go right over the edge. And again, I know I'll trim that down. I still have a little bit of the peppermint peeking through on the bottom. So again, I'll just play around with that. And then I think up top I want the remainder. So I'll trim this. And I can set it right down on my tree. Now I'm totally covering the tree. I just have the peppermint, the text, and then these two here. But once I pin them into place, I can flip them over and start to trim to make it look like a tree again. I'll reserve this piece. I'm not sure if I'm going to use it or not. So right now I just want to take my pins and pin my fabric into place. So now that I have it pinned into place, I'm just going to flip it over and trim it down. This will bring my tree back into focus. So there I have my tree shape again, along with my base. So I'm really pleased with the way that looks. It's whimsical and it's fun, and it's nowhere near complete. So now I'm going to take it and bring it right to my background piece here. I'll figure out exactly where I want it and how much I want exposed of the tree and the tree stump here. And now I'll take another pin and pin that into place. So now I want to start attaching it to my page. You could make just little small stitches basting it in place, but I'm just going to jump right in and actually start stitching my piece down. I like to use small stitches at first, and I start here, and I'll start right on this red piece, right where it borders the joy piece, and I'll make little stitches just the length of that red piece. So I just make straight stitches. You can use any stitch you want. That's the beauty of this. The stitches are both functional and aesthetic. In some of the crazy quilting, you'll see beautiful ornate stitches, and they just mark the border of where the two fabrics join up. So now I'm trying to create that little attachment, but I'm also trying to make it so that I can remove these pins. I know that eventually I'm going to start adding ribbon to my piece just to make it really stand out. So I want to stitch just enough to hold my piece together so that I can play with the ribbon. So these stitches that I make here may or may not show when it's time to add the ribbon. That's why I just make some simple stitches to start with, and then I can go back in and embellish it further. So I'm just going to stitch around the pieces to hold it in place, and then we can start embellishing it with that ribbon. So I stitched it down, and as you can see, it's still kind of a little floppy in places, but it's stitched securely. It's not going anywhere, and I have all my pieces in position. Decided I'm not going to use this little scrap of fabric after all. But now's the fun part, where this is where the crazy quilting really gets enjoyable. I go through my trims, and I can just see what trims I want to add to my tree, if I want to add any. This one's kind of fun here. And you tend to follow the guidelines that you've set out with your pieces. Now, there's no hard and fast rules. If you want to make that strip of ribbon or trim go across your piece, go right ahead. It just typically would frame the different sections, and each section would have its own little personality, maybe additional stitches or something fun, some metallic element. So I like the way that looks. Just clip that off. Happy with that. So I'll stitch that down at some point, and then I'll just play around with my other trims if I want to add something a little more whimsical here. And that's kind of really cute. So I think actually I will start at the bottom here, measure that out. And as usual, I like to cut my trims a little long. I'll stitch them down and then trim them afterwards. So now for the rest of the tree, I can take each of these sections and really embellish it with stitches and beads and buttons, or not a thing, or nothing at all. And it's really up to you how much you want to do here. This ribbon is a little wide, so if I use it, I'm going to have to cut it down. Same thing with this one. I think I'll maybe just add a cute little button here, just like that. I'll stitch around all the pieces to hold it in place. I don't think, well, actually I kind of like that little button up there. I can audition another one and see if that size is a little better, but I think I like that little rounded shape. So I'll stitch around, attach these trims, and then come back and see if there's something missing. This seems like a very large area for me. I think it needs something, but I'll stitch these down with my threads and then we'll come back. So I stitched everything down, added that little button, and you can see how this really started to come alive. So right now I think I want to add something in here. I could leave it as it is, but I think that blank space is just calling for something. So I think I'm going to make 3 French knots. And because the way it works in my mind here is I have this one little element in the center up top, then the next major element is down here, and then it gets even longer. So it's forming that triangle shape for the design process. So I want to keep up with that. So I think I'll make 3 French knots kind of in a row, and it'll taper off. So I'll start with a knot in the center here, and I'm going to just use that darker thread. That looks roughly to be the center. So I'm going to stitch, wrap my needle with my thread 3 or 4 times, maybe 5, get a nice big knot in the center here. Keep that thread taut on the end of the needle and then go back in very close to where I came out. And I have that nice little knot. So I can just either make 2 more with this thread, but I'm going to switch to that other color. So I'll knot off this thread on the back, trim both pieces down, and now I'll just continue making 2 more knots with this red thread, 1 on either side. I think I'll make them just a little smaller. So instead of 5 twists of the thread, maybe I'll only do 3. And again, I keep that tension on that thread, stick my needle back in, pull it through, and I'll do one thing over here, trying to make it even. Turn it around and match it right up. Again, keeping that tension on that thread as I pull my needle through. And so now I have this one element, this another element that's just slightly larger, and so on down the length of the tree. So I'm really pleased with the way that came out. I can continue to embellish it further, but I'm quite happy with that. And I like the way it's a little untraditional. It's still a Christmas tree, we're still using Christmas fabric, but because it's red instead of your typical green, it really stands out. Now here's a variation just using black and white and grays. And instead of a button, I use a snowflake for the top, and I added these 2 little metal embellishments here. Again, it's unusual and completely unexpected, and yet it's recognizable as a Christmas tree. So that's how I created my whimsical Christmas tree, based on a patchwork or crazy quilting design. It's a fun technique that I can use in my fabric journal, or I can stitch a backing on and use it as an ornament or gift tag. Those are my favorite things to do at Christmas time. I enjoy the stitching process and the end result. If you found this video helpful, please give it a thumbs up and be sure to subscribe. Thanks for joining me today.